Mr. Meagher's conduct on the night of May 4th was the most violent. He committed his crimes without pause and served his muscle for the pack. Mr. Meagher needed only the slightest motivation to attack Mr. Pink. Ostensibly, he heard from Ms. Bailey, who heard from Mr. Zapata, that something had to be done about Mr. Pink. He was more than willing to sprint down Market Street with little notice, such that he could target the victim. Mr. Meagher acted as a scout when he found Mr. Pinckney standing in the back exit hallway, illuminated under the restaurant's lights. Inferentially speaking, he reported his findings to the group, and they collectively sought to impose their violent will on the victim. More to the point, he acted with a hair trigger when finally given the opportunity to confront Mr. Pinckney, a person with whom he had no relation based on the evidence at trial. He engaged Mr. Pinckney while the victim's back was to him with a "What's up, motherfucker?" He showed no hesitation in provoking a fight with a man 6 inches shorter than him, along with extra bodies for good measure. He repeatedly provoked a retreating Mr. Pinckney to engage in a fight Mr. Pinckney was sure to lose. It only took his girlfriend, Elizabeth Bailey, instigating the physical contact for Mr. Meagher to make a knee-jerk response of launching himself at Mr. Pinckney. He delivered a haymaker to the victim, was repelled by Mr. Cornelius, and immediately wanted to up the ante, grabbing a deadly weapon to aggravate his conduct. To put a point on it, he even used a racial slur that does not need to be repeated to further prod a conflict out of Mr. Cornelius. Even after he was expelled from the restaurant, Mr. Meagher showed his resolve for fighting more by grabbing his genitals during his exit. Undoubtedly, Mr. Meagher's conduct was the most raw, vicious, and aggressive of the three co-defendants. The people find no factors in mitigation regarding his actions. With that, the people submit the following sentencing recommendation: 12 months, informal probation, 20 days, county jail, standard fines and fees, that Mr. Meagher obey all laws during the course of informal probation, that he have no contact with Mr. Pinckney, that he attend a 16-week anger management class, submit to warrantless search for firearms, and be subject to a 10-year firearm restriction, and the people are requesting immediate remand.
So I obviously have some disagreements with some of the factual assertions that Mr. Pinckney made, specifically as it relates to the other incident. I think we proved it in the motion to eliminate that Ms. Bailey was dismissed from that case, and Judge Maney did not find that she had even probable cause that she committed anything. So I just wanted to put that on the record. As it relates to this case, I think it's in some of the jury statements, but I think the general consensus was that Mr. Pinckney was an instigator to this. Maybe it didn't rise to the level of a legal defense or a self-defense type situation, but the probate, when you're looking at the different factors in the probation analysis, one is if somebody's proposed, and is that provoking incident likely to reoccur? And I would submit to this court that this was just kind of a one-time intense situation that quickly got out of hand as it relates to the water spill, as it relates to how Mr. Pinckney reacted to that, as it relates to how he went to 1724 and had some sort of contact with Ms. Bailey. I disagree with the people's assertion of what the facts showed, that Mr. Zapata brought Ms. Bailey into this. I believe it was the action of Mr. Pinckney and Mr. Cornelius going to 1724 that brought Mr. Meagher and Ms. Bailey into this. I do think the evidence does support that. As batteries and 415 goes, I cannot think of a less significant battery than grabbing somebody by the shirt. And I think that Your Honor can look at similar offenses when determining, the appropriateness of the punishment, looking at other types of batteries. And I can't think of a more low-level battery than just touching somebody on the shirt or grabbing them by the shirt. As it relates to the people's, recommendation sentence, Ms. Bailey already has been booked and released. I don't think the 16-week anger management is statutorily required. I don't think it's necessary. Ms. Bailey has no criminal history. I was able to get a couple character reference letters of some friends that I can submit to the court at the appropriate time if they're necessary. But Miss Bailey essentially has been a law-abiding citizen her entire life. And, you know, this May 4th incident was totally out of character based on, you know, her history with the criminal justice system. I think the court can just look at just the wildness and the craziness of just how this all transpired, and specifically how Miss Bailey got right into this. Miss Bailey's not on social media engaging with Mr. Pinckney. She's not involved in any of their political disputes. Essentially, I believe Mr. Pinckney testified to it that he was using the B word, the C word prior to any of this. That's all, I think, factors that go into the provoking analysis of this.
Mr. Mayor, up to this point, has been a productive, normal citizen judge. Before I got involved in this case, I had no idea what any of this was about. The everybody in blue and all that. I was completely ignorant of any of that. And in speaking with Mr. Mayor, I feel like a lot of the outside influences really have nothing to do with Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, and I understand that there's been a decision by the jury, but I stand by my argument that Mr. Mayor was acting in relation to what he perceived as a threat to his loved one. This was not a conspiracy with Mr. Zapata to attack a political rival. That's just not what happened here. And again, despite the trying to minimize this case when inconvenient, I think it's clear that words like heinous, they're completely inappropriate for this case, Judge. This court has heard cases that may raise to that level. This is not one of those cases. The 1 year statutory probation, I understand that. Mr. Mayor spent a number of days in jail for the first time in his life.
I want to make something really clear. I think I would be remiss not to say what I'm about to say. Listening to Mr. Pinckney's testimony up here, I understand the frustration of what he's gone through. I want to say,
Let me back up just a little bit. We're catching a lot.
Okay. I want to say something, you know, that I mean, and that needs to be understood by the court, needs to be understood by everybody in this room, is that I 100% disavow any threats that have been made to Mr. Pinckney. I'm not encouraged. I have not told anybody to go after him. I've never once. In fact, I can show messages where I have told people, leave him alone. Do not say anything to him. Do not go after him. I believe he's a misguided young man. I believe he's a young man with a lot of issues that I hope he deals with. But I have never once encouraged anybody to hurt him. In fact, it was never my intention to hurt him. It was never my intention to bring anybody to hurt him. You gotta remember, I was called by a friend multiple times after not answering my phone to help them, which is why I left my wife in the car. Which is why I walked back there. So I need to tell the truth about this, and I should have testified when I had my chance. I should have. I should have told the truth. Because what you have made me out to be is not who I am. What the district attorney has done, I hope in the future will show what the actual purpose was. It will show it was a political deal. It was an attack against me and my family. Since the verdict, Mr. Pinckney has posted pictures of my wife online. He's made memes about my wife and I, cutting out pictures of my wife's face. And still, I wish no harm upon him. You guys have hitched your trailer to the wrong person in this case. The person that should have been, the question that I got the most throughout this entire process, and I'm so tired of talking about this process. I talk to a lot of people today. The number one question I get is, why was Mr. Pinckney not charged, and why were you charged? By every single person asking me about this. It doesn't matter. The jury did what they did. We cannot undo what's been done at this point. We need to consider what is right and what is wrong, and who is who. What I have done in the community, what Ms. Bailey and Mr. Mayor have been in the community, and then what Mr. Pinckney has been in the community. Somebody who has terrorized old ladies in this community, somebody who has gone to businesses and tried to get them shut down.